From kindergarten until 6th grade, most of us Stowites attended the same elementary schools. We knew those places like the backs of our hands, and life during school time was mostly a matter of jumping through the hoops until the buses arrived. However, 7th grade was a completely different matter, and one that introduced apprehension to the curriculum. All of us who had previously identified as Woodlanders or Fish Creekers or Indian Trailers or whatever were now headed towards the one middle school to rule over all, otherwise known as Kimpton. Preparing to go to Kimpton Middle School was the first inkling that recess as we knew it was indeed over. Like a lot of other middle schools of its time, Kimpton subdivided its 7th and 8th grade students into instructional teams. For students, this meant that we would be taught most of our subjects by the same 4 or 5 teachers assigned to our team. The team streams would rarely be crossed. I may have spent 7 long years at Woodland with a guy on Team 7-1, but from this point on I was a member of Team 7-2. And who knows what sort of shocking pagan rituals those 7-1 types performed on warm weekend nights. I had my own suspicions on how these teams were selected, but nothing I could actually prove at the time. Kimpton was much larger than the narrow halls of Woodland, and its immenseness was not lost on a small potato like me. We would all congregate in the cafeteria area just before classes began, and the first few weeks were usually spent looking for anyone, anywhere who used to attend the same elementary school we did. But that summer between 6th and 7th grade seemed to have an effect on many of us. Yes, I did go to that much smaller elementary school in an entirely different city with that guy over there. But that's where the similarities now ended. We were all Kimptonites now, a young adolescent example of e pluribus unum. It was now all about the team. What team are you on? Who's on our team? I hope that kid isn't on my team. Kimpton was the opening 2 years of the 222 educational top or top schizophrenia that defined Stowe's philosophy on higher learning for decades. Speaking of educational philosophy, one of my teachers at Kimpton explained the underlying concept behind the apparent madness of the team teaching system. Kimpton was built at a time when a behavioral psychologist named Maslow was the man of the hour. Maslow, unlike his draconian predecessor Benjamin Skinner, believed that students, like all of God's children, learned best when their basic human needs were met. Maslow developed a triangular chart that listed the hierarchy of needs, from the concrete items such as food, water, and shelter, to those more esoteric needs such as peace, love, and understanding. Maslow was obviously a pinko and a hippie, but I digress. Once a person had all of these needs met, which could take an hour or a lifetime, then he or she would enter a nirvana-like state called self-actualization. A self-actualized middle school student was a happy middle school student, and much less likely to become a burden on local taxpayers years later. In order to follow the path of self-actualization, a student at Kimpton should have felt free to explore his or her outside environment without getting so hung up on society's rules. Man. In reality, we still needed hall passes to meet a few basic human needs. Maslow conveniently left off the chart. We didn't go to the establishment's library, with its buzz-killing due dates and repressive Dewey Decimal System. Instead, we went to the IRC, the Instructional Resource Center. The IRC may have had the trappings of the man's library, but we were free to explore our literary space at our own pace, and we liked it that way. The cafeteria at Kimpton almost toppled this apple cart of harmonic self-actualization, however. French fries had long been a love-hate thing among students, since the elementary school offerings were usually thick, frozen crinkle-cut fries, barely put through the deep frying process. At Kimpton, however, the cafeteria began to serve thinner, shoestring French fries, which came ever so close to duplicating the mythical McDonald's fries. The lunch ladies originally served these fries in huge cups, easily double the size of anything served elsewhere. A ritual for eating these fries soon formed. First, the cup would be overturned onto the serving tray. Salt would be added, accompanied by several small paper cups filled with ketchup. This mountain of potatoey goodness would be consumed quickly, lest the small problem of congealing oil spoil the process. That's how it worked for a few weeks anyway. As if straight out of a low-budget prison film, however, the polar opposite of self-actualization crept in. The fries became so popular so fast that others who missed out on them the first time would resort to stealing. Swiping someone else's fries became so commonplace that a lot of us would hold a metal fork in one hand while eating our fries with the other. Any inmate who tried to steal our fries ran a serious risk of getting the back of his hand aerated for free. Several students did in fact get stabbed, so the school took measures to curb their criminal impulses. Without admitting any tactical error on its part, the school switched out the metal forks for plastic ones. The stabbings could still take place, but the victory was largely academic. The cafeteria also switched to smaller cups, so the former excesses were no longer a factor. Another idea borrowed from the swinging 60s was the belief that today's dabbler will become tomorrow's customer. 7th graders were allowed to explore each and every creative or industrial art program for precisely 6 weeks at a time. This was usually enough time to decide if third-degree burns from a spot welder were more to your liking than making, and compelled to eat, cookies made with 4 tablespoons of baking soda. Students could also decide between a lack of native ability in visual art and a lack of native ability in music. During the 8th grade, enlightened students could choose 2 of these disciplines for a semester each. After learning how to sew an apron, make a wooden toaster tongue, weld coiled wire into a trivet, and make a sauce from orange juice and sugar, I opted for the music classes. One of my music instructors was also a very talented folk singer and guitarist, although local venues were few and far between. We learned the basics of music composition, from scales to notation to rhythm, but I could tell his sweater vest-laden spirit was elsewhere. Every so often, he would break out his acoustic guitar and entertain the class with a passionate rendition of Harry Chapin's ode to absent parenting, Cats in the Cradle. He seemed especially wistful during the final verse, in which the son exacts karmic revenge on the inadvertently neglectful narrator father. I can very easily imagine a major motion picture about his life. Mr. R's meaningful folk guitar with hushed, intimate vocals opus. The other music instructor had a habit of standing in the hallway between classes, holding a ukulele and a kazoo. As the young Van Halen and Led Zeppelin fans filed past his classroom door, he would blissfully saw away at a vintage Rudy Vallee or Al Jolson snippet for his own entertainment. Heaven knows we weren't getting the job done. During class, he would throw out challenges to the more musically inclined. One time he asked us all to sing a note as long as we could in a single breath. I remember it came down to me and my church friend and fellow musician, Steve S. Steve and I looked at each other as the other competitors dropped out one by one. By the time it was over, Steve and I both looked like the poor opera singer tormented by Bugs Bunny inside the Hollywood Bowl. The 2 years spent in the welcoming and nurturing arms of educational visionaries like Maslow didn't exactly prepare 8th graders for the next step of the journey. All of us self-actualized little people were about to meet the anti-Maslow, a man named Skinner, in the rat maze and cheese collection known as Workman High School. But that's a story for another day.